Hi, book club members. I'm Jen.
And I'm Carrie.
And this is Warhammer 40k Book Club, where we read from a Krieg. This is episode number 127, and our book is The Siege of Vraks by Steve Lyons. It tells the story of the titular Siege of Vraks. And, oh boy, we posted several questions on our website, WH40k bookclub.com, and we encourage participation in our conversations via YouTube, our site, or Encrypted Vox channel. Spoiler warning, if you aren't familiar with this campaign from the Imperial Armor rules supplements and this book, definitely check out the book before listening to this episode, as we're going to discuss the book from start to finish in great detail. With that, let's dive in. As always, Carrie, did you like the book?
I had no idea this was an actual campaign.
It originally appeared in Imperial Armor, which, somebody keep me honest here, my understanding is that those are typically like rules and campaign supplements.
Okay.
Like a lot of them. A lot.
That just kind of makes it all the more interesting, honestly. But yes, I love the book.
I did too. Steve Lyons, I really like what he's doing with the Death Corps of Krieg. I know that some people online, Reddit, apparently things are heated in the Death Corps of Krieg fan base. Very interesting to me. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's very interesting to me. I really like what he did with it. I really liked the characters, with one very notable exception. And from what I can tell, this campaign is very long, very convoluted, very nah. And so I think he did a pretty good job.
Well, it's kind of how I imagine siege warfare would be.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're going to talk a lot about that.
Trench warfare.
In the future. Before we dive into that particular topic, though, what part stood out to you?
I mean, all I can say is there's a reason why we didn't go back to that after World War I. Just saying.
We were like, no mas.
Oh, probably one thing that does stand out to me, because I actually went back and flipped through the book to see if that ever got resolved, is when I think he was a colonel at the end, Colonel Khaled, who didn't get his name until Vraks, when he scratches out his name on his dog tags. Because I was hoping that when they got to the dungeons, they would find him. But I'm going to guessing what they did find in the dungeons. They might have found him, but he was now one of the demons. But I mean, he still scratched out his name, and that kind of made me. It was a very Krieg thing to do, but it made me sad at the same time, just because of a certain person who made him feel pride about who he was.
Yeah.
And, oh man, I know. It was also when the commissar, the Lord Commissar, when he died. It's like, first of all, that is a badass way to go. You did not flinch. And when oh my God, I can't remember his name, but he's not a general, but that colonel, when he sees the skull with the hat on it, it's like, you guys are all dicks. Oh, and I found it interesting that we had like two different Loyalist chapters come down, do some things, and we're like, time's up, and leave. Like, seriously. What's the point of you Astartes? Like, man, if these were the Ultramarines would have stayed till it was over, because I've read those books.
We're going to talk about that in a second here. But actually, let's just talk about that really quick. Do we think they were fallen on the planet? Is that why Azrael shows up? And then it's like, yes. And we're out. Peace, bitches.
Yeah, they found them. And we're
because remember, at the end, they talk about just how many war bands were identified. It wasn't just like one or two dudes.
Right.
Of course, some asshole invited a Nurgle worshipping band, and I mean, obviously, he ruins the whole party. It's why you don't ever invite him to anything. But
even the Core Knights were just like, and we're out. This has been fun, like, but it's time to go.
Woo! Look at the time. They really are like this is. I can't believe I'm going to make this reference, but like the Death Guard and anybody who worships Nurgle, they really are the pig pen of the universe. Like, shows up and everyone's like, peace, gotta go. Yeah, but like, do we think that was one of the things? Like, I think they were fallen on the planet because it's weird that like the entirety of the Dark Angels
And
show up, including
Azrael.
Azrael, and then they just peace out. They're just like, all right, we're done. Like, guys, in fact, when that happened at the beginning of the book, because I honestly I know that Siege of Vraks is a thing. I wasn't really familiar with it before, so they leave, and I'm like, well, there's still a lot of book. Like, is this going to be a bunch of political nonsense after this? Oh no. No, we still got like 15 more years of war to go through.
A lot of trenches that need to be dug. Lots of people got to die.
Yeah. And they just pieced out.
It makes me wonder how many cultists were actually on this planet, man. I mean, it's like playing a video game and the enemies just keep coming.
Mm-hmm.
And you're thinking, man, if you guys really had that many people, wouldn't you have won this war? That's what I always think when I'm playing video games, and it's just me. Somehow I'm defeating everybody.
Pretty much. This was the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you mentioned the dungeon, so I have to say one of the parts I thought that really stood out to me was the end when they pull all of the sororitas out of there and they cover them with sheets, basically to protect their reputation. And that broke my heart. The idea of these badass warrior women just being broken down to nothing.
Yep.
And I mean, they're probably going to get the Linny treatment.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to tell them about the rabbits and then take care of them.
Or turn them into penitent engines.
Yeah, that could also.
Which I think I'd rather be I'd rather be dead.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of different things that they could do with them, but they obviously can't have any sign that what happened to them happened to them. And I thought that was really heartbreaking and really sad. Mm-hmm. Not as sad as the traitor turned Krieg that Taxis finds.
Oh yeah.
He had a line that I really liked where he said that, I wrote this down, he said, "I did what I've always done, followed the crowd." His whole story stood out to me as being a very interesting thing because he talks about, Taxis is grilling him about, why would you go along with these traitors? Well, because everybody else was. Like, I followed the crowd, right? And the thing that was hilarious.
And he's a cardinal, right? Why are you going to question a cardinal?
I'm not going to question the cardinal, right? And everybody else is going along with it. And the thing that I also liked that stood out to me as a neat little, how did you fit in with the Krieg for so long? These people don't talk. These people have no personality. Like, I put on the uniform and I just followed what everyone else did. It wasn't until he had to go operate an earth shaker that they're like, how the hell do you not know how to run this thing? Oh, shit.
Yeah.
One of you. I like the idea that they immediately call in the confessor, like, something's not right. That I liked that. I thought that was kind of fun, and it's very Krieg.
I also thought it was fitting that a failed assassination from the Ordo Hereticus is what kicks this whole thing off. I was like, man, the Inquisition, you guys can't do anything right.
It all would have saved him had they just killed him. Like, we would have avoided this entire event. But, you didn't realize
the
that he had
Hereticus, like, they
archaeotech.
sent in one lone assassin and they didn't do their homework on how he might have been protected or something. It almost, to me, made me think, because it was failed, he didn't get all the information, like, were you set up? Did they want a war to happen? Because that's totally in the Hereticus's idiom as well. They're like the frickin' CIA. We're on your side, but are we? We got to do things that benefit us and what we want out of the situation.
Yeah. And I don't know the answer to that question, but so we've already kind of addressed that the Siege of Vraks is like a major event in the Warhammer 40k universe. There's so much going on here. And in hindsight, after like really diving into the Imperial armor stuff after I finished the book, realizing, oh, this is all like little supplemental things, right? did Steve Lyons, did he do it justice? Like, did he pull together this complex giant thing and make one cohesive narrative? Was it interesting? Did you like it?
So I didn't know it was a campaign, but one thing I liked about it the most was seeing how these characters, their promotions, just by outliving them, literally outliving everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a game Ubisoft put out years ago called Valiant Hearts, and it was about trench warfare in World War One. And that game hit me so hard. Like, I am boo-hooing at the end with, anyway. But it was the first game, really, because like games, when they're about World War, they're about World War II, right? Because World War One is not a glamorous war. I'm putting this air quotes, no war's glam, but it's not, glamorous because of the trench warfare, because it was so awful. And people were dug in and didn't move for years. And so this reminded me a lot of Valiant Hearts, of really showing how awful trench warfare is and how long they are stagnant on both sides.
That's the part that I thought this book did a really good job of illustrating, is because you're not wrong. World War One, there's a God, I read this a few years ago. They were talking about movies and Hollywood movies, and like it was when All Quiet on the Western Front came out. They talked about how many movies have been dedicated to World War II versus World War One.
Yeah,
it's and it's because the story is, I think there's a few things going on there, but I think a large part of it is like trench warfare is not glamorous
action,
right, and it's pretty awful
unless you get into the submarine warfare, because that was the first war with all the submarines, and then that's going to bring to I don't remember, is U-571 about World War II or World War One? Either way, that movie haunts me.
Remember, they're getting the Enigma machine. Oh,
that's right.
I can't do submarine movies in general because every submarine movie has a scene that I cannot handle, and it's the inevitable scene when they're being depth charged and everyone in the sub is just looking up at the ceiling as if they're going to somehow see these depth charges. But it's this nerve-wracking thing because you cannot see this explosion coming towards you, and you know it's coming towards you. Oh, and by the way, that thing's like the thickness of a tin can. I can't do, like, I get so, like, whenever we watch movies with that, I'm always like, I can't breathe.
And Sean asked me once if I wanted to go into a submarine. I was like, as long as you promise me it stays above water and that hatch never closes. Like, because if that hatch closes, my fingers are going to get caught in it. So I'm just like, no.
I've been in one once, and they closed the hatch to show us. They were like, this is the difference. And I was like, open that right now. Not fun. But World War One, because it isn't very glamorous, because it is very claustrophobic and is very horrific, in some ways, it actually lends perfectly to Warhammer 40k universe. Like,
seriously,
it's kind of the natural coupling. There's a few books in the Gaunt's Ghost series where they really talk about trench warfare, and it's not as in detail as this. Like, I thought this did a really good job of, oh, by the way, this is horrible. Mm-hmm. This is absolutely awful. And to your point,
nobody is having a good time here.
Nobody's having a good time, and it's slow. This is not quick warfare. If you're building trenches, you're literally digging in. And it kind of makes you understand why the Iron Warriors were a little grumpy. But
why they might have smelled like dirt.
And entitlement. You were the reason I'm very angry. I know, and I don't care. Still one of the best videos they ever did.
Agreed.
I thought he did a really good job of not only describing that portion of it, like the trench warfare and how awful this is. He did a really good job of humans versus space marines, and how really, really terrible that is. I thought he did this one is it's an interesting campaign because you have a lot of things. You have disease from Nurgle. You have just torture, like the straight up torturing people. You have the horror when he describes that Cornite going through people like a hot knife through butter.
Right.
He does a good job with that horror, and he does a good job, I thought, of showing, yep, this is going to be like a 20-year war. This is going to take us like 20 years to liberate this planet, and here's why.
The other thing I liked about it was that he showed that, yes, the Krieg are, they're perfect for this. This is what they're made for, but at the same time, like, they're only human. So it's when, God, what is his name? Tybor. When he sees, that the main bloodletter come through, and he's like, there's nothing we can do. Like, there is literally nothing we can do. It's time to go. And the commissar, aims a gun at his head, but then the commissar runs as well, because what's the point in dying? And I was like on his side. It's like, I know it's like, no, we do not run. Well, why? So that more people can die?
To this thing.
That they're not going to beat?
Let's jump ahead a little bit and talk about Tybor, because he, in general, God, I loved his character. Loved his character. He, not just as a Krieg, like I genuinely hope we get to see another book about him. Because that was a character who stood out, and he's probably gonna make it into the book club of the year awards. Just throwing that out there. That scene in particular, the pragmatism that he shows of, yes, he's terrified. And I don't want to take that away. He's definitely, because that's what bloodletters do, right? He is terrified of this thing, but when he gets on the box and he's like, run to fight another day, just run. And you're not wrong. I love that scene where he looks at the commissar and he realizes the commissar hasn't pulled the trigger yet. And they both just take off running. It's shameful in the Warhammer 40k universe of it, but I loved the Inquisition's reaction to it.
What's so crazy to me is that, I know that in modern day wars, obviously we're not fighting demons and stuff, but there is a big thing, with today, that with those battles, when they know they're going to lose, they run because life is precious. And It's because, with the Krieg, like, we can just go get 1 million more.
Right.
I mean, what's the big deal? And that's like the biggest, and we've discussed this many, many times, about the waste of life that they do in the 40K. They just don't care.
It is. They don't care. It is definitely endless reservoir for them.
Even if it means nothing. Because these guys, even if all of them turned and attacked that demon, they wouldn't have done any bit of damage at all.
No.
There is nothing they could have done. It would have been a serious waste of life. They wouldn't have even put a dent into it. Even if they did, it just would have healed.
Right. Like, they couldn't have done any victory that they've gotten would have slowed it down at best. You want to talk about
it wouldn't have even been a Pyrrhic victory.
Exactly. Like, this is all bad. And the fact, so his character in general is very interesting, because we see him in the beginning and he's very much a Krieg soldier. And then by the end there, I think that right there was his turning point of manifesting humanity, his actualization and realization as not just as a Krieg soldier, but as a man and as a leader. And it's funny to me that he immediately is just guilt-stricken. The next time we see him, he's just guilt-stricken.
He talks about how it's his greatest place of shame.
For demonstrating actual and real leadership.
Right. Because, we would argue that a good leader knows how to save their men.
Yes.
And
which he attempts to do.
And a good leader understands that sometimes you have to sacrifice some of them for the better of all. But there was no sacrificing here. There was nothing. Because sacrificing even just one person would have sacrificed them all. There was literally no point to any of it. And it takes a good leader to understand that. So I guess it's like, we really haven't seen a thinker, right, with the Krieg outside of Yerton.
Right. And so the fact that you have this guy who has lasted long enough to rise through the ranks, get some experience, and then also actually become a leader and morph into a human being. I liked that. I thought that was good use of it, because the narrative bounces through multiple points of view. Kind of like, it reminded me adjacently of like Ken Burns's Siege of Vraks. It was more like or like for people who have read Max Brooks's World War Z, it was more like a documentary of the Siege of Vraks. And I mean that in the best way possible. Did you like the storytelling of bouncing between all these different people?
I did. I really
I thought it was
did.
very effective.
Plus, it made me really hate another character even more.
Oh, we're going to talk a lot about that person in a minute here.
But like, I really liked getting the point of view from the different colonels, especially when they start off as lieutenants, right? So then they get their names, and then you find out, because they show the year, you're like, wow, so it's been about 3 years later. It's like Captain, Colonel Tybor, like veteran Colonel Tybor. It's like, whoa, okay. And he's probably only like 30. And he's he's, a veteran colonel. And because, they also each had their own fronts of the war to fight. So we got different, perspectives from that. Got to hear, their different, how they handle things a little differently, from the disease to the blood demons to, just the regular cultists who really sadly think that they're fighting on behalf of the emperor.
Right. Which I think actually made this a little bit sadder. This whole thing a little bit sadder, because yes, you had fanatics. Yes, you had cultists who were like, hell yeah. But you also just had people who legitimately thought they were fighting for the emperor and didn't know or understand it, because it's been bred in them not to question. Right. I think you're right.
It's like, it's a cardinal, right? Like,
what are you going to do? Question the cardinal?
Well, the same thing like with the Catholic Church, like with the Pope. They're going to question, if the Pope says that they need to go to war on something. I mean, I don't know. I can't answer that now, but not too long ago, many Catholics have been like, well, then yes, that's what we're supposed to do. We don't question the Pope because he's a divine being. So, and I think that's one reason why they now have all those cardinals around them that can, it's like, you all right there? Little kind of crazy. But I could also see, if, especially a cardinal, but this, they're supposed to be like a, they speak with the emperor. Like, not like what we hear about, priests are like, I talk to God. Most priests are like, no, we don't. We preach God's word. But these cardinals like, no, I actually do talk to the emperor. And my response is, actually, you don't. But that's cool. And these people, when they think that, I mean, he's like, the emperor is telling us to do this. Of course, they're going to go do it.
Of course they are. We have been bred not to question. And I think something you had said earlier, though, about them, I did like that every character's point of view showed a different part of this war. And a different front, and a different part of all of these.
All the enemies, all the factions.
All the complex moving
swear,
pieces.
Because I know that, he called for help. And so that one group came down and were like, you're useless, and threw him in jail. And it was almost like this beacon went up to all these other factions who were just like, hey, there's war here. And they're like, sweet. Haven't killed things in a while. Let's see what we can get.
Did you hear he's throwing a party on this planet?
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're all invited.
It's the house party that gets out of control.
Except for Slaanesh. They're not invited.
But you invited Nurgle.
And then Nurgle comes and they're like, and party's over. Closing time is playing overhead. Right. It's time to go.
You have to go home, but you can't stay here. Yeah, for sure. I liked, going back to the person that we talked about earlier, one of my favorite pieces I liked was the commissar and the colonel who were friends. And you see this maturation of their relationship as they grow into becoming like when he talks about how he takes his helmet off in front of him and he's like, whoa. They become well and truly friends. Which is why it's particularly funny. Not like necessarily in a ha-ha kind of way, but even I, like when I listened to the audiobook when when he realizes, he's like, oh, when I told him I was old and tired, he's giving me my swan song out. Whoops. Because even he misjudged that friendship. What it means to be friends with the Krieg. I really did. I thought that just all these different aspects of the Krieg and how they're kind of I don't want to say unknowable, but these outsiders looking in on them, right? And trying to understand them and trying to integrate within them, but they never really do. And they never really understand them. I thought that was kind of a fun little piece to examine. Their general reactions, again, to siege warfare, this is what they do. And I don't want to say this was not as wanton of waste of human life as the last book that he did. I can't think of the name of it right now.
I think it was just called Krieg.
But was it just called Krieg? It was just called
so.
Krieg, wasn't it? Yeah, it was just called Krieg. That one in particular had a lot of just, that was more like the memes of just throw yourself on stuff. This I thought was a good job of showing, we kind of waste our lives a little bit, but we're also a little bit smarter about it too.
Yeah. I was just thinking it'd be interesting to have a Krieg and Cadian book. That way we can have what it means to be Krieg, what it means to be Cadian.
And then all of a sudden the Catachan just comes screaming through the middle. Be pretty good, actually. Slime Arbo just shows up.
That'd be fun, actually. I'd be cool with that.
Let's talk about Confessor Taxis.
First off,
let me ask a question. Honest question, and I would ask this to our listeners as well. Are we supposed to like Confessor Taxis?
I go back and forth on this.
I did not like her.
No.
Let me say that.
I did not like her either, but I felt like we were supposed to be sympathetic towards her.
I thought we were.
The crazy thing is the whole time I was like, oh, you're from the Inquisition. And I was just waiting for this. Like she was like trying to, kind of like what we had in the Krieg book, trying to get under, and just like, how can we thwart the Krieg by making them doubt themselves? This is how I can bring in my head count as an Inquisitor. So I had to say I was...
Same fucking thing, by the way,
like,
which is really funny that you say that. The whole time I was like, is she really part of his retinue? Is she part of an Inquisitor's retinue? This is a trap, is it? Oh.
Yeah, that's... But it turns out she wasn't, and I was kind of disappointed that she wasn't. Because at least then she would have had motivation for what she was doing. So instead, for what she's doing, I was like, you're just a bad person. You just don't understand. You're trying to make people think.
Hot stirrer.
You're trying to make people act in the way that you think people should behave instead of trying to understand the flock that you're administering to. And you're bad at your job.
She was just very much a political creature. And I think that was... So my read on her was that she was that manipulative political end of the Imperial Church, right? Where the whole time she's like, okay, how can I craft stories? Like, I did love when they would go through all of the stories, like the story about like, and he rose holding the flag, or so she imagined. And like this story as she crafts it and how she's all, they, whenever they're telling the narrative, right, they would always be like, I mean, she talked to like 6 different people and she kind of pieced this all together as she becomes this part of this. I mean, quite frankly, she's a propaganda machine. And that's...
You know what it reminded me of? And the second Dark Imperium book, when Frodo Matthew is writing down the story, and he keeps inserting himself in there, what he thinks was actually happening, what was going in Raboot's mind and everything. It's like, you guys wish that you were as badass as them on the field, don't you?
Yeah. And how you will not convince me that she genuinely saw Tybor as a person. Because she loved the stories that she could spin about him, right? She loved the stories.
Whole sermons. Don't you want to be like this hero?
Whole sermons on Colonel Tybor.
Instead of like focusing, on the saint that they're supposed to be protected, she could totally have done all these speeches about the saint. Because there's like the Bible, there are plenty of people that you can like uplift and talk about how these stories can relate to you. But no, she had to write new stories because then those are hers, right? Those are hers to tell.
Those are her stories. She's the one who found Colonel Tybor. She's the one who recognized his potential. She's the one who started that story. And it did feel a little manipulative going back
100%.
to, and again,
she's manipulating them all to think that they can be heroes, and that's not the Krieg way. The Krieg way, they are already heroes in their own way, but by thinking they can have their moment, it got that one guy killed when he realized that he charged in because he wanted to have his Tybor moment and he shouldn't have. What a waste.
Well, and the thing that she doesn't understand, going back to a comment that you made about not understanding the flock to which she's ministering, she's trying to apply hey, this has worked with other regiments, but that's because other regiments already have a sense of individuality baked into them. This is a very specialized regiment, and they have a very firm social structure. And I'm not necessarily saying I approve of their lack of individuality and their lack of identity. I'm not saying that I think that that's a really cool thing. It's really awesome, and we should all do this. But what I am saying is that is their thing, and that is their way of life. So the fact that she was then coming in and being like, well, but what if you were just Carrie? And what if you, Carrie, were a hero? That's not... So I actually really like at the end of the book where veteran Colonel Tybor is kind of narrating his stuff, and he's just like, yeah, I've actually heard that now they're even getting more militant about not giving people names because this was such a failure. And we saw so many regimental breakdowns because this woman thought that she could make stories, and it did. And maybe I'm just taking a really dim view on her, and I don't know why. So this is why I'm genuinely curious to other people who read this book in our audience, like what you thought of this lady, because I just everything she did. And I think I'm torn because I really liked the story of that guy. The guy who escaped being one of the traitors to then join the Krieg. The fact that she basically is like, okay, off you go, little fella. Go pretend to be a Krieg. Madam, that is not your role.
Right.
I don't know why that really did rub me the wrong way. That she's essentially meddling in something she doesn't understand even. She thinks she does. Because she's an arrogant little thing.
Well, it's like going into, like you're saying about their individuality. Like that's their thing. And it's not even their thing to not have individuality. But the problem comes like with that guy who rushed in because he wanted to be a hero. It breaks with their training. It breaks their rhythm to have these, instead of, they're not thinking of themselves individually instead of as a group, which even the Cadians don't do that. Even the Volpone Glory, yes, they do our glory hounds, but they still think of the group. They're not a good leader unless everybody comes home. And the fact that they're like, oh, but I could have my Tybor moment. Any regiment that has those feelings is not going to come out of it alive.
Not only that, there's something about just letting it happen. Like naturally, I found myself in a situation and I thought to myself, wow, I'm going to do that, right? I'm going to do this. This is going to be my moment in the sun. So I want you to imagine for a second, for everyone, I'm going to go to a Marvel movie, and I'm really sorry in advance, but imagine the first Captain America movie, if you will.
That's a good movie.
It's a wonderful movie. But when Tommy Lee Jones pops the thing out of the grenade and he chucks it and Steve jumps on top of it, right? That was a natural hero moment. Imagine now for a moment if they revealed that he was told to look for a moment.
Right.
It would have really cheapened the whole thing, right? So then now all of a sudden you have these people who are looking for artificial hero moments. They're looking for, it actually kind of reminds me a lot about what we complain about with the Adeptus Sororitas, how they're always looking for opportunities to martyr themselves and they end up wasting themselves in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of that. And I think, but that also fits with her character, right? Of like, well, you want to be a hero for the Emperor? But they don't understand. Like, you're trying to teach people who don't really understand this whole concept. And
what she should have been teaching them is that what you're doing is making you a hero of the Emperor.
Right. And not to inspire other people. And she was just, it just felt like she was going through the motions, right? She's like, well, I drop on the planet, I find some stories, I tell them, I make heroes.
You can inspire people without encouraging them, to be heroes. And it's like, even like, look at the fire department, for example. They're big on nobody's a hero, right? Because what we do is already heroic. And instead of shining light on what you're doing is heroic, it's like, don't you want to be that hero? Which is totally missing the message.
The goddamn point. Yeah, exactly that. Also, in this, I
was not sad when she died. I was just like, what's it like being a hero while you're sermonizing out in the field? Oops, you're dead.
I tell you my really evil thought. When she was like charging in on that, I was like, oh no, he is going to actually give her a heroic moment. She's going to get her. Oh no, she's dead. Okay, cool. Good. Like when she died, I was like, good.
She didn't even have she didn't even have a worthwhile death. It was
so ignoble, which is why part of me thinks maybe we're not supposed to like her. Like, part of me thinks we were supposed to think of her as a meddling priest.
I mean, maybe because at one point she's even like looking around. She's like, "Oh my God, did I cause all this discord and all these problems in the Krieg?" Yeah, bitch, you did.
You did. I'm sorry, darling. You did. I did love when she meets the Inquisitor, and she's just like, "Well, we have to save the shrine," and he's like, "I don't give a shit about your shrine," and she's just like, "Clutch the pearls."
Oh yeah, like because the Ordo Malleus gives a shit about anything.
Yeah, seriously. I'm sorry. Do you not know who you're dealing with? This is the Inquisition. They're omelets and eggs type of people.
As soon as the Inquisition got involved, like this is our war now. Just like the FBI taking over in Die Hard. It's like, well, this is going to make a mess of everything, and sure enough, it did because that's the Inquisition.
Them showing up. We'll talk more about them in a second.
I like how they summoned in the Grey Knights for half a minute, and the Grey Knights like slaughtered a bunch of demons, and we're like, we got somewhere else to be. I think
we got a tea time.
You know what? We had a prognostication about over there, so we're leaving now.
I actually have to tell you,
but the Grey Knights could have won the war. This had the Grey Knights go and charge it. Would have been over.
Apparently they were busy. They were just like, all right, we have booked you in between our tea time. Right. And then, like, what? That was the only thing with Taxis that I liked. I'm actually glad you mentioned the Grey Knights because that was the only scene with Taxis that I liked where she sees them and she's like, oh, I know that those things exist because going through like studying old military records, she's like, their lack of presence in certain conflicts has made me think they exist, but I ain't saying anything about seeing them. Like, she immediately is like, avert thine eyes.
Because honestly, when they first showed up and they're, go after demons, I was like, well, it's been fun knowing everybody because they're going to kill everybody. It's like, I'm sorry. Did you see the demon? We have to say goodbye to you now, but they didn't. And I was actually totally expecting the Malleus when the demons showed up just to be like, well, nobody can see this, so exterminatus. Oh, and nobody gets to leave either.
Talk about that for a second. The Inquisition is here. And how were these good? Were they a good Inquisitor or a bad Inquisitor? And
yes,
did you trust them?
No. I mean, are they good? Are they bad? Yes.
Yes. I actually really liked them. They were not personable.
No. I mean, but he was able to think past what the Ordo Malleus typically does. And, now Tybor, like, you're mine now. You're part of my retinue. You can't go back because they will kill you. So you're just going to stay with me because I have use for you.
I did love when he's like, what will happen to you? It's like, well, they'll court-martial me and kill me, which is what they should do. And him going, seems a waste. Because, again, for good or bad, the Inquisition definitely, unlike the rest of the Imperium, which is just like, throw bodies at it, the Inquisition does recognize strong people and talent. So I'm like, the fact that he looked at Tybor and was like, yeah, that one's valuable, does not surprise me at all.
I mean,
and maybe that's why I'm
sent out millions of other people to die, but it's like, oh, but that one.
Yes, but I was emotionally invested in Tybor. I wasn't emotionally invested in those other millions of
characters. I'm just saying that,
okay?
Is he good? Is he bad? Yes. Like,
yes, exactly.
It's about what suits him at the moment. And what suited him at the moment was like, you're a thinking Krieg, so I like you.
There's also an oddity to that, though. And you really do get the impression that he's like, interesting.
Yeah.
A Krieg that actually, and I hate to say this because we just like teed off on Taxis. That's partially because of Taxis. She kind of awakened something on him.
But you know, the colonel that I can't remember his name, who was friends with the commissar, he was a thinker.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. We just didn't get to see as dramatic of an example of it as we do with Tybor. That whole demon scene is dramatic.
I like that the Inquisitor had no use for her. And, you know, when he kept like, well, where is she? And he talked to her like, she's not seeing anybody anymore. He's like, okay.
I love the way so maybe it's because I listened to the audiobook, but when he asks about Taxis, the narrator definitely made it sound like, she's not going to be seeing anyone anymore. Anyways, moving on.
My thought was
very dismissive.
Was Alan Rickman in Die Hard? Second Die Hard reference. He's talking about Mr. Tanaka. He will not be rejoining us for the rest of his life.
Very dismissive. It was just very dismissive and like, I didn't really need this person. I also got the impression from the get-go when he meets with Taxis, both of the Inquisitors, when they meet with Taxis, they're both just kind of like, okay, like not impressed with them at all. And I don't know if that was just maybe something that the narrator was adding in because they're kind of aloof as is and very removed from humanity, which is something that we've talked about a lot, but they were both kind of were like, oh. Well,
she was like, you know, because she saw one Inquisitor, but she's like, I want the Lord Inquisitor. And he was like, nah, you get me.
Yeah, exactly. That's not how this works, darling.
And you know, she's pleading with him about blah, 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 blah. And he's just, I don't see why I care about your little problems. But I'm part of the ecclesiarchy. That's cute.
Right. I'm not really big into the ecclesiarchy. I got other things to do. I hook up with the Red Scorpions every now and then, which, maybe kind of, and the Grey Knights who are definitely, but yeah.
So we heard that the Dark Angels were here. That's interesting. We may need to make a note of that.
Make a note of that, please. I have so many questions about that. Like, we see a lot of Red Scorpions get killed. We see the Grey Knights, but like the fact that all of these factions, and this is the part where I was like, so I actually initially, as I was reading this, I knew that the Siege of Vraks was like a thing. It was like a named event, but I didn't know anything about it. And I really didn't know where it came from. I wasn't sure if it came from another book or not. When the Grey Knights bamfed in and then bamfed out, and we'd already had the Dark Angels bamf in and bamf out, and then we lose a bunch of Red Scorpions, then I was like, wait a minute. What is this? This feels like this was a campaign or something like that. And that's when I really dove into the whole Imperium. And I was, okay. I get it now. This was, and then I waited until I finished the book to actually dive into it. But
if I was
that makes sense.
Play the campaign, I would pick the Grey Knights because I'm not here for very long. I got a timetable. Right. You get me for like 2 hours.
I show up and take care of the demons. But now we have more demons. I'm sorry. I already dealt with the certain demons, and I am now several systems away.
I was going to take care of those demons. Not these.
Exactly.
Those. So
I said those demons, not those demons. The emphasis makes all the difference. It was a little chaotic, but I did like that even when they show up, because I had the same thought when the Inquisition shows up. I'm like, whoa, well, now it's gonna. Wait, we still have a lot of book left.
Right.
Like, there's still quite a bit of book for this, and yeah, even they, like, I got the impression I did like they show up and they're like, all right, Mom and Dad are here. We're gonna fix this whole thing in a few years. Like, even they ran into problems. That kind of made me feel a little bit better.
Which just just shows how much trench warfare sucks.
In the end, Carrie, was it worth it?
Well, they got to say that they won, right? So, sure. The bad guys were destroyed.
Enemies became friends.
The good guys won.
Everyone was richer for the experience.
I don't know how much of the planet was left, but details.
I guess in that
like
sense,
some of this, like did they even discuss like if they found the saints' relics, or was all that destroyed? I don't even remember.
I think it was mostly destroyed. Like, they kind of gloss over at the end. Like, again, it's like, what? Like, to your point, yes, the Imperium is going to mark this down as a victory. It's going to be a footnote somewhere, right? And maybe some person like Taxis who likes to study these types of battles and stuff, like, there's going to be like a handful of people who study this and know it and are going to be like, oh yeah, that was a pretty bad one. But overall, it's just another day, another...
Are they going to, repair the damage? No.
No, probably not.
Who's ever left in Vraks is going to have to deal with all of that, and hopefully they don't die from whatever disease got left in the soil. I'm shocked they didn't exterminatus the place. That would have honestly solved a lot of problems.
I actually really liked when Tybor kind of breaks down where he's like, look, this could have been stopped a few years in had they just done X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. And you kind of get the impression that the Inquisitor was having very similar thoughts, right? Of like, yeah, we could have ended this far less costly. And yeah, at some point, exterminatus, like, I imagine if the Inquisition could probably go back, yeah, we would have just killed the planet. Or done some type of grave major thing like that. But the fact that it was so horribly mismanaged, so horribly run. I did like that too, by the way. And I think that's something else worth calling out here, was that the same problems that we have today of bad management, bad leadership, poorly run. Like, I feel like a lot of times when we get presented with like large overarching figures, like these Lord Generals who are overseeing a giant campaign, they're presented as being maybe a little callous, but very smart and very reasonable and rational, and they had no choice and blah, 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 blah. This is one of the few examples where, nope, leadership screwed us. Like, leadership is just bad.
It's like, not exactly mismanagement, but more of underestimated.
That too, right? Like, yeah.
Which led to mismanagement.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was very realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I agree. This is going to take way too long, because even when we're reading the Space Marines battles books, like, they talk about like how many years it is, but it never feels that way because it's constant action. I thought this was such a great way of showing that war is not like that. War keeps going, and it's stagnant. There's no movement. There's a lot of defeat. Some victories, then more defeat. Mm-hmm. And when you got these different generals coming in, like, well, now I'm going to fix it. Oh, this is more complicated than I thought. Well, I'm going to come in and fix it because this is so simple. This is more complicated than I thought. Something that you and I talk about all the time is that if you see a problem like this and you think there's a simple answer, then you don't understand the problem.
I literally always tell my daughter, when it comes to like, especially global conflicts and global problems, and even within our own country or our state, like when it comes to governmental problems and stuff like that, if somebody tells you that there's a simple solution, they don't understand it. Period.
Yes, because every problem is 10 times more complicated than you think. There is not a simple solution for these types of problems. And that's what I think these generals came in. And even the Inquisitor came in. It's like, there's a simple solution to this. No, there really isn't. It's complicated. Why is it complicated? Because people are involved.
Because people are involved, and
there's
you're dealing
changing
with
dynamics.
chaos. Yeah, you're dealing with chaos. Like, oh, we okay, don't worry. The Grey Knights came and they took care of all the demons. Cool, great. That's a demon. Oh, I mean, they got rid of most of the demons.
They got rid of all the ones that they saw. It's not their fault.
Yeah, they got rid of
others
like the
showed
big
up.
ones.
Yeah.
But that's a bloodletter.
You guys got it, right? Totally. It's cool.
Right?
Cool.
Like, again, it's chaos. Like, you are dealing with a very unpredictable, unstable enemy. And yeah, you're dealing with people, you're dealing with siege warfare, everything that goes into it is just, it's very complex. And I do agree with him that, yeah, there were some really bad leaders involved there who couldn't admit their mistakes. But again, it's very human. It's a very human mistake and a very understandable, right? I did like, though, that it's like, oh man, this, like, so Siege of Vraks in general, this, if I had to describe this battle just like in one phrase, it would probably be clusterfuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just very convoluted. It's very in the complicated, I guess, because convoluted has kind of a negative connotation to it. Very complicated. It's very long. So long. And in the end, I got to the end and was like, I mean, at least my boy Tybor survived.
Right.
But
That's about all you could say.
It's about all you could say. Like, the loss of life is tremendous, especially like every time they talked about like losing all these red scorpions or losing all of this, that, or the other Space Marine. I was like, God damn, like that's expensive. Was it worth it? I don't know. I think you're right. You get to the end of it and you're like, well,
I guess in the eyes of the Imperium it is, right? Because bad guy's gone. Okay.
Bad guy's gone. Bad guys.
Well, to quote another
driving me crazy.
Another Marvel movie, when Thanos gets his way and he has the vision of Gamora as a young child, she's like, "Did you win?" And he said, "Yes." She goes, "What about the cost?"
What did it cost?
Yeah, what did it cost?
Everything.
So,
yep,
that's kind of what this is. They won, but what did it cost?
At what cost? Yeah.
Oh
no, I
mean, just a few million, Krieg. We can just grow more.
2 million. Yeah, well, but that's the thing is that in the grand scheme of the Imperium, you're absolutely right. Totally. It is worth it. We won. There's more people where that came from.
Well, because who's signing off on this is someone from the Adeptus Administratum, how many light years away, who's just like, cool, check that one off the list. I guess I can put myself in for promotion now because we won that war.
Right. What is the name of, by the way, if you've never listened to, what was that audio drama? What was the name of that audio drama? It is phenomenal. It's by Alec Worley. It is, it's the one with the Adeptus Administratum woman who is being haunted by this figure. I cannot recommend it enough, but it will make you look at the Adeptus
Watcher
Ministorum.
in the Rain or something?
Watcher in the Rain. That's exactly what it is. That's the one. Definitely recommend listening to it. It is fantastic. But it'll make you look at the Adeptus Ministorum very differently. Very differently. So now when you mention that, I'm like, what was it, this lady? Anyways. The things that I think of in my life. I think I got to, so yes, in terms of like the Imperium, is this worth it? Totally. But I got to the end of the book and was like, damn, that wasn't worth it. It's a good book. I really loved it, but I wouldn't chalk this one up to a win.
I mean, honestly, war is hell, right? Well, here's why. Like, this actually delves into it. There's nothing romantic about it in this book. There's no glory in this book. And we can't say that about a lot of the Imperial Guard books, Astra Militarum books we read. There's always some glory. There's some romantic notion With that, I don't mean like literal romance. I mean just, the romantic idea of what they are doing. Like even in, oh my God, that one about the tanks.
Yeah.
Steel
Tread.
That, it had romanticized it a little. This was just like, this sucks. Every part
Pretty much
about this sucks. And even the victory sucks, which kind of reminded me a bit of that Warhammer Plus short animation that I didn't like, but you did, where the there's that mechanicus with, I don't know, her automaton.
I loved that one. I loved that one.
And she runs across, an Imperial soldier who's just like, where's my regiment? And he's like, they're all gone. He's like, but why? She's like, this is what victory looks like. And it's a barren wasteland.
I loved that one. I thought that one was great. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a very dark one that looks into how both the Mechanicus and the Imperium operate. This one, it's dark. It's terrible.
I loved it.
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. The one thing that we kind of talked about with Steel Tread that I think is important to mention here too, that we hadn't mentioned earlier, is that yet again, we don't really know what was going on in this. And that's because we're following the Krieg. And the Inquisition doesn't share information.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the Cardinal doing here? What was his overarching plan? With whom was he working? How does this World Eater / Cornite guy get involved? Like, all of those things. But at the end of the day, I guess none of those answers really mattered. What mattered was the loss of life for these things.
Right.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. And we did just realize that we also never read Dead Men Walking, which is also part of his Krieg books.
To be fair, that was written back in 2016 before we started this. So
I'm just saying. So we'll have to add that to our list sometime. My point being is that I'm actually really excited for it because I really like Steve Lyons' writing style. I really like what he's doing with the Krieg. I think we need more. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm excited about that. But because we're doing this episode a little late, we are going to, for our next book, we are going to dive back into the Wayback Machine as we wait for our new books to arrive, which allegedly they're going to. And we are going to go back and read the first novella in the Yarrick series by David Annandale, which is Chains of Golgotha. Digital copy, everybody.
Yeah, let me see how many pages it is in this tiny ass print. Less than 100, so
I think it's like 124 regular pages.
It's 190. Sorry, it's 98 pages in this tiny ass print. So that'll be fun. Definitely gonna get my.
That'll be.
Yeah, I'm gonna
get your readers out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that'll be important. But
yeah, I just turned 47 people, so like literally just turned 47. So yeah, the readers are a thing.
We were supposed to originally podcast on your birthday. I was gonna before we dive in, happy birthday to everybody, to you from everybody. But now we're here, so it's a week later, so you don't get anything.
It was after we got back from vacation, and I was tired.
It's fair. I was too. I was quite tired, so yes.
And I had a lot of fun doing a whole lot of literal nothing on my birthday. So I was like,
that's amazing. And I love that.
I was like, I don't feel like podcasting. I
even said, are you sure you want to podcast on your birthday? And you're like, that'll be fine. I was like,
well,
I'm gonna plan on it.
That was vacation Carrie. And then
that's true.
Then post vacation Carrie was like, I'm really tired. It's not happening.
And that's fair. Again, that's totally fair. But the good news is we're going to read Chains of Golgotha, and then after that, our Warhammer shipments should be in, and we should have all kinds of new books. Actually, legitimately, well, I guess Dead Men Walking is a re-release, but
new to us.
And there are 2 legit new books coming out.
And actually, there were quite a few people on our YouTube channel who were like, what other book did he write? And we're like, wow, he wrote Dead Men Walking back in 2016. They're like, what? I didn't hear about this. Like, well, fortunately, they're re-releasing it. So, we'll get another chance.
I think they're also re-releasing, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're going to do a Krieg version. So like they did Deadman Walking looking like this. And I thought I saw that they were also going to re-release Krieg looking like this too, because this is an
It
absolute
is, but
delight.
I don't know if I want to rebuy that book. I mean, I know I'm saying this with how many books have I rebought, but
Spines have to match, Carrie.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
All I'm doing is contributing to the problem of them reprinting books into, pretty formats.
That is the truth, but I'm happy to do that as well, by the way. Which BT Dubs, they had that. Now I can't even find the article. I was going to pull it up on here. Oh yeah, no, there it is. They had an article that they put out on the Warhammer community site with all of the upcoming books, which, yes, please, for Warhammer 40k. So maybe potentially this year we'll even get more new stuff to read, which is exciting. But as always, keep your recommendations for the Wayback Machine coming in because we might need them.
And we are going to be reading Vraks. So for everyone who's like, please read Vraks, we will.
We will be reading Vraks. Yes,
that's one of the books that's supposedly on its way.
Yes, allegedly it should arrive tomorrow.
Supposedly,
we will see. Yes, we will see. Allegedly,
but because to quote Iskander, trusting the Games Workshop is foolish, like trusting the warp. I believe that's exactly what Iskander Kane said in that book. To be totally honest,
it is. He did actually say that
word for word.
Word for word.
Which is why we're not going to read Vraks. We're not going to claim we're reading Vraks because we could totally say that we are, and then the book never shows up.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden we're like, never mind.
Yeah, so Chains of Golgotha.
No, don't want us to read it anyway.
We'll get that done in less than a week. So you'll get back-to-back podcasts in the meantime. So, and it'll be hopefully a whole bunch of new books from here on out. Fingers crossed.
Yes. By the way, I had to go back on the Warhammer site. Yes, sure enough, they're showing Krieg in this special edition. So
God damn
I have to imagine. I know. I'm very excited.
Well,
I'm just really excited.
I guess I'm really, really glad that I'm getting a second yoga class to teach because that's what's funding this problem.
I'm just saying that I need more Colonel Tybor in my life now.
Well, maybe we will. Maybe.
The Adventures of an ex-Krieg corpsman with an Inquisitor? Look, I'm here for it, okay?
I guess. I mean, the Inquisitor has to come along, I suppose.
Obviously. Part of the kill team. Anyways. Do you want to take a book, Carrie?
Well, maybe we can get some Grey Knights, too, because then that might be tolerable.
That'd be amazing.
Yes. I would love to see Grey Knights interacting with Tybor. I need this. Steve Lyons, get on it. Like, now.
That would be awesome.
Right? So, you've listened to the Warhammer 40k Book Club episode regarding Siege of Vraks by Steve Lyons. Be sure to join us next time for Chains of Golgotha by David Annandale. Sorry, I don't think it's an audiobook, guys. I don't think any of Yark's on audiobook. Really, really sorry about that. It's just why the only time we ever got to hear what Yark might sound like is in the animation of Old Baelai. Maybe one day they'll do that. I don't know. But regardless, you know what? They probably will because they're going to reprint the whole thing into some fancy, amazing looking limited edition that I'll have to get and contribute to the problem. Anyway, we are an unofficial book club and not affiliated with the Black Library or any of its affiliates. You can find both the vidcast and podcast on our website, WH40kbookclub.com. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, give a review, and all those good things to the vidcast on YouTube or the podcast anywhere you get podcasts. And come join our Discord. It's fun in there. Everyone gets very excited about new books, and then they show the amazing things that they paint. It actually makes me want to get out my stuff and actually paint, but I probably won't. But it makes me want to. That should count for something. Our site also has articles about adventures and reading other Warhammer 40k books and short stories outside the book club books. I'm almost done with Horus Heresy, you guys. I'm finishing up number 52 this week. And then there's just 2 more left. And then Siege of Terra. It's never going to end. But in the meantime, please stay a while and read from a crag.
At this rate, we might end up reading the Siege of Terra for this podcast because it's the only thing that we can go grab from the Wayback Machine.
No. We got tons of omnibuy. I I've gotten you to agree to maybe even the second Dark Angels because you're going to make me read Double Eagle and Brothers of the Snake. So.
Namaste.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.